Carol Vorderman has lost her job with the BBC after breaching the corporation's new social media policy. Vorderman regularly abused the government on Twitter before the new rules came in, but she said today that BBC management has decided she should give up her Saturday morning show on Radio Wales over a breach of those guidelines. Well, last night, Vorderman tweeted the two most senior civil servants called Johnson's number 10 mad and poisonous. Hashtag COVID inquiry. Simon Case said, I've never seen a bunch of people less well equipped to run a country. While people died, the NHS was on its knees and money was funneled to the VIP lane. Well, joining me now is former BBC Radio 4 presenter Roger Bolton. So, Roger, I guess you could say hurrah to the BBC. They brought in social media guidelines. Carol Vorderman contravened them and she's met with her fate.
Well, I think it's rather sad, but it's inevitable. The guidelines are quite tricky to understand, so they will be defined by individual cases. And I think this is one where the BBC put to Carol a contract which incorporated the new guidelines, and she wouldn't accept them because she thinks that's limiting her right to free speech. I think the specific part of the guidelines that probably caused the problem, which is that bit which talks about all BBC staff and freelancers are required to respect civility in public discourse and not to bring the BBC into disrepute. And as you know, she expresses herself quite vividly. She's called the government a lying bunch of greedy, corrupt, destructive, hateful, divisive, gaslighting crooks. Well, I think that sort of thing probably does bring the BBC into disrepute.
It certainly does, and the rules are quite clear that they're on the BBC website for all to read. Individuals working in news and current affairs and factual journalism, along with all leaders, have a particular responsibility to uphold the BBC's impartiality through their actions on social media. She clearly didn't, so she had to go. I wonder if Vorderman does believe in free speech, though, because she spends half of the time trying to get people closed down, particularly TV channels, who don't agree with her. So do you think she'll have got her just desserts?
I wouldn't pass judgment on that, but I would suggest to you, since I know that GBNews wants to have strong and vivid opinion expressed, and you've just been expressing them in the previous item, why don't you ask Carol Vorderman to present a show for you where she can express these views? You know, why don't you? And then she can have express views which would be different from yours, but would be vividly expressed. Now, I think Carol, you know, she's a very good presenter, but I do think that language went too far. And I do think what it represents is a real danger in our democracy, where we assume that everybody we disagree with is in some way crooked, bent, whatever. You know, I don't feel like about Rishi Sunak or whatever, or about the leader of the Labour Party. I mean, they're faced with considerable, massive problems. And, you know, if we use this sort of language about them, we're not encouraging them to be open with us. We're encouraging them to fear us and fear what we're going to say, because the first thing we'll do is accuse them of being crooks.
OK, Roger, well, if Vorderman's got the chop, surely Gary Lineker should be next.
Well, I think what's interesting is, of course, the BBC. It looks as though BBC are going to get Match of the Day back, the new contract. I think ITV aren't going to bid. So they'll have to make a decision down the line about who they want to present it. And that's a decision for Gary Lineker, because he will be difficult, because he'll present it with a contract which will put into the contract these BBC guidelines. And he has as a show which is one of the most important shows, and he is a figure who's supposed to, or many people take to be a representative of the BBC, will either have to sign up to be relatively silent in future or express his views very carefully.
OK, Roger Bolton, thank you very much. I'm afraid I have to limit your freedom of speech simply because of time. We have to leave it there. Thank you for joining us on GB News. Cheers.